A young billionaire came across two homeless twin brothers who were crying and pointing at a dilapidated bridge. When he got closer, he started crying upon discovering what was on that bridge. Late afternoon sunlight poured its golden glow over the skyscrapers in the financial district as Jack Martinez walked away from the world he had built over the last 15 years. The orange reflection on the mirrored windows of the buildings created the illusion that the entire city was on fire, a spectacle he used to admire from his penthouse, but which today felt strangely melancholic when viewed from street level. At 35, the young billionaire had developed a habit his advisors found at least eccentric: walking alone through the city's underprivileged neighborhoods, dressed in ordinary clothes, faded jeans, a basic white t-shirt, and a dark jacket that had seen better days. It was his way of staying grounded, a reminder that beyond the air-conditioned boardrooms and financial reports, there was a real world pulsing in the streets. His platinum Rolex, the only concession to his true social status, was carefully hidden under his jacket sleeve. Not that he feared being robbed. Something in his demeanor, even dressed casually, emanated a calm confidence that usually kept trouble at bay. But Jack didn't want to draw attention. These walks were his refuge, a way to reconnect with the reality beyond the mirrored walls of his corporate empire. On these strolls, he observed real life unfolding: street vendors arranging their goods, children returning from school with colorful backpacks, seniors chatting on park benches, workers waiting for buses with tired expressions after a long day. It was a world completely different from the PowerPoint presentations and financial spreadsheets that occupied his mornings. That particular afternoon, his feet led him even farther from the center, where luxurious buildings gave way to older, deteriorated structures. The air carried a mix of scents: food being prepared in small corner eateries, exhaust fumes from old cars, and the dampness typical of the nearby river that cut through the city. That's when he saw the bridge, a towering concrete structure that had once known better days but now bore the deep scars of neglect. Cracks snaked through its pillars like dark veins, exposed rebar glittered like broken bones in the twilight, and graffiti covered its sides like faded tattoos. Jack paused for a moment, contemplating the structure's decay. In his mind, plans for revitalization were already taking shape. His business instinct always looked for opportunities to improve, build, and transform. His thoughts, however, were interrupted by a sound that sliced through the late afternoon air like a knife: children crying. It wasn't an ordinary cry, it wasn't a tantrum or a playground scuffle. It wasn't even the cry of a scraped knee or a broken toy. It was a cry laden with despair, the kind that makes your heart clench, the kind that carries a weight far heavier than any child should know. Jack turned his head, searching for the source of the sound, and that's when he saw them. Two small boys, identical down to the last detail, standing near the base of the bridge. The twins could not have been older than 5. Their brown hair was disheveled and dirty, and their clothes, noticeably too large for their skinny frames, showed clear signs of prolonged use. One of them was clutching the other's hand so tightly his knuckles were white, while both pointed insistently at something beneath the bridge. Big tears rolled down their dirty faces, leaving clear trails on their dusty cheeks. Most striking was the silence between their sobs. There were no screams or shouts, just that muffled crying and those tiny fingers pointing urgently. "Hey, are you okay?" Jack called, keeping his voice gentle and approaching slowly so as not to scare them. The boys turned in unison, a motion that would have been almost comical if not for the look of pure terror on their faces. Their eyes, an extraordinary shade of green, were wide with a mixture of fear and pleading that made Jack's stomach twist. Instead of answering, the twins merely intensified their gestures, pointing even more insistently toward the area under the bridge. Their sobs grew louder, but still retained that unsettling silence, as though they were afraid words might make whatever was happening all too real. Jack felt his heart rate spike. Years of business experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and at that moment all of them screamed that something was very wrong. Without hesitation, he moved closer, and to his surprise, the boys, rather than running off as one might expect with a stranger, grabbed his hands and pulled him toward the base of the bridge. The space beneath the structure resembled an urban cave, partially shielded from rain and wind by the concrete supports. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness, Jack began to make out details. Pieces of cardboard had been arranged to form a sort of makeshift shelter, covered by a faded and torn blue tarp. A small pile of belongings, some carefully folded clothes, a worn backpack, an old violin in a scratched case was neatly arranged in one corner. And there, lying on a thin, worn-out mattress, was a woman. Even in the room's dim light, Jack could see she was young, probably not older than 30. Her face, though marked by suffering and exhaustion, still held traces of a delicate beauty that even poverty could not completely erase. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, and her skin, pale as paper, glistened with a thin sheen of sweat despite the cool evening temperature. "Sarah," the woman whispered with difficulty, her eyes flickering open when she realized Jack was there. "My name is Sarah." Her voice was just a breath, but it carried a dignity that stood in stark contrast to her circumstances. The twins rushed to her side immediately, their little hands touching her face with a tenderness that broke Jack's heart. There was so much love in that gesture, so much worry in those bright green eyes, that for a moment he felt like an intruder, witnessing something deeply intimate and sacred. Jack knelt beside the mattress, noticing how Sarah struggled to keep her eyes open. The fever was obvious in her flushed cheeks and the slight tremor running through her body beneath the thin blanket. You need to know," Sarah began, her voice faltering as she labored for each breath. Every word seemed to cost her immense effort. "If something happens to me, Ethan and Noah," she indicated the twins with a small nod of her head. "They have no one else." Jack sensed she wanted to tell her story, perhaps fearing she wouldn't get another chance. Gently, he took her feverish hand, encouraging her to continue. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering her strength, and then began to speak. It was a story Jack would find painfully common in his city, despite its outward show of prosperity. Sarah had been a music teacher at a private neighborhood school. It wasn't a job that paid much, but it was enough for a modest apartment and to raise her children with dignity. She gave private violin lessons in her spare time to supplement her income, and on weekends, she took the boys for free performances in the city park. The first crack in her stable life came with the pandemic. The school, facing financial difficulties, began cutting costs. Music classes were deemed non-essential, and Sarah suddenly found herself unemployed. The private lessons also dried up, because very few could, or wanted to, keep extra expenses in uncertain times. "At first, I thought it would be temporary," she whispered, her eyes fixed on some distant point, as though she could see her past projected on the concrete walls of the bridge. "I had some savings. I was always careful with money. I thought I'd find another job soon. But the bills kept coming and job opportunities were scarce. The apartment was the first to go, just for a while," she had promised the boys, "until things get better." They moved into a rented room, then into an even smaller one. Sarah sold her most valuable violin, a family heirloom, to keep her sons fed. The instrument had been a gift from her father, also a musician, and selling that piece of her history hurt more than she would admit. She started taking any kind of work, cleaning jobs, handing out flyers, anything that brought in some money. "But a big city can be merciless," she continued, her voice now barely a whisper. "Every time I seemed close to getting back on my feet, something else happened. The boys got sick, a job didn't pay what was promised, a landlord suddenly raised the rent. The bridge became her last resort when the money for the final rented room ran out. It's just for a few nights," she had told the twins, forcing a smile as she arranged their few possessions under the cold concrete. But the nights turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Sarah still managed to keep the boys relatively clean and fed by using the bathrooms at a nearby diner, whose sympathetic owner turned a blind eye to her situation. Sometimes she got a few dollars playing her old violin on the streets, but the constant cold and humidity began to take their toll. A cough that started as something minor gradually worsened. Sarah ignored the symptoms as long as she could. She couldn't afford to be sick. She kept fighting, doing everything possible to shield her children from the harsh reality. "They're so little," she murmured, tears rolling down her face as she looked at the twins. "So brave. They never complain, you know, even when they're hungry, even when it's cold." Jack listened silently, his heart clenching. He observed how the twins, Ethan and Noah, remained by their mother's side, their green eyes filled with a concern far beyond their age. He saw their small gestures of care, how they tucked the thin blanket around her, how one tried to offer water with trembling hands. The sun was already setting, painting the sky in orange tones that reflected on the murky river water. The temperature began to drop, and Jack noticed the twins shivering in their thin clothes. Sarah had drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the effort of sharing her story, her breathing still irregular but a bit steadier. Jack rose carefully, his body stiff from kneeling on the hard ground for so long. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How many other stories could that bridge tell? How many other Sarahs, how many Ethans and Noahs lived in the shadows of the city he had helped build? The twins watched him with a mix of hope and apprehension, as if fearing he might simply walk away and leave them alone in their despair. Their green eyes, so much like their mother's, followed his every move with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Jack felt something warm and wet on his face and realized he was crying. The tears came without warning, born of a deep empathy he hadn't known he possessed. There, beneath that crumbling bridge, all his achievements, his entire financial empire, seemed empty and meaningless compared to the human drama unfolding. The wind was blowing harder now, causing the blue tarp to flap against the concrete pillars in a rhythmic, melancholy sound. In the world beyond the bridge, the city began switching on its lights, oblivious to the small drama playing out on its outskirts. Cars passed on the nearby avenue, their headlights occasionally illuminating the space under the bridge, casting dancing shadows on the concrete walls. Jack looked one more time at this makeshift family, the sick mother, the frightened children, the poverty that surrounded them like an invisible prison. The contrast with his own life was so striking it hurt. Somewhere in the city, his driver was probably worried about his delay. He had important meetings scheduled for the following morning, business that couldn't wait. With one final glance at Sarah and the twins, he turned and began walking back toward his world of glass and steel. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if his body resisted leaving that place. The image of the twins' green eyes, brimming with tears and silent pleading, was etched into his mind like a photograph he knew he'd never forget. Night fell completely over the city, wrapping everything in darkness. But for Jack, that encounter under the bridge had illuminated something within, an unsettling truth about the gap between his wealth and the misery existing just a few miles from his skyscrapers, a truth that would not let him sleep that night, or on many others to come. As he made his way back to his car, the sound of the twins' sobs still echoed in his ears, a persistent reminder that sometimes fate puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't yet know why. Jack remained in his car, parked in front of the bridge, for a long time after the sun had set. Through the tinted glass, he watched the shadows lengthen beneath the structure where Sarah and the twins still struggled to survive. He couldn't shake the image of the boys from his mind. It stirred memories he had buried deep in his consciousness for years. 28 years ago, he was just Jackie, a skinny 7-year-old who slept under a building awning with his mother, Elena. His father, a compulsive gambler, had disappeared after racking up enormous debts, leaving Elena, an immigrant from Mexico with broken English and no family in the city, to raise her son alone. Eleanor worked as a cleaning lady in 3 different places, but there was never enough money to cover the debts her husband had left. One day, the landlord of their small apartment decided to raise the rent. It was winter, and they had nowhere to go. Jack closed his eyes, recalling that first night on the street, the biting wind, the fear of strange noises, his mother's silent weeping when she thought he was asleep. "Look at the stars, mijo," Elena used to say, pointing at the sky between the buildings. "Tonight our roof is the entire universe." She tried to turn everything into an adventure, shielding her son from the harshness of their reality. But Jack noticed how she shivered on colder nights, how she skipped meals saying she wasn't hungry, saving the little food they had for him. Change came unexpectedly. One night, as they searched for a place to sleep, they found an elderly man collapsed on the sidewalk, suffering a stroke. Elena didn't hesitate. She used what little money she had to call an ambulance and stayed with him until help arrived, holding his hand and murmuring comforting words in Spanish. The man was Robert Martinez, owner of a small chain of laundromats. Once he recovered, he sought out Elena and Jack. He discovered that, despite all her struggles, Elena kept Jack in school, helping him with homework every night under streetlights. Impressed by her strength and dignity, Robert offered her a job at one of his laundromats and a small apartment above the establishment. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Robert had said at the time. Jack could still hear his rough, kind voice echoing through the years. Robert, who never had children, began treating Jack like a grandson. On afternoons after school, while Elena worked, he taught the boy about business and, more importantly, about compassion. "Money comes and goes," Robert would say, sitting in his worn-out chair in the laundromat office. "But what you do for others, that stays forever." Elena worked tirelessly, learning every aspect of the business. Jack watched her deal with customers, buyers, suppliers, and employees, soaking up her lessons on perseverance and dignity. When Robert passed away 10 years later, he left the laundromats to Elena and Jack. By then, the boy from the street was a determined 17-year-old with excellent grades and a guaranteed spot at a prestigious university. In college, Jack excelled in business administration. His practical knowledge of running a small enterprise, combined with formal education and a deep understanding of the needs of ordinary people, made him a natural entrepreneur. He expanded the laundromats, diversified investments, and built his empire while always keeping the values Elena and Robert had instilled in him. Elena passed away 5 years ago from an aggressive cancer. On her deathbed, she held her son's hand and whispered, "Remember the stars, mijo. Now you can give a roof to those who only have the sky." A knock on the car window pulled Jack back to the present. It was his driver, worried about how long he'd been there. Night had fully fallen, and the city lights twinkled like the stars Elena used to show him. His phone vibrated, another urgent message about the next morning's meeting, about contracts needing review, about decisions that couldn't wait. But all Jack could see were the twins' green eyes, so much like his own had been once upon a time, when all he and his mother had was each other and the sky as a roof. Robert and Elena's words echoed in his mind, mingling with images of Sarah, feverish on her thin mattress, and her children, so small and burdened with so much. The bridge that had witnessed his discovery a few hours earlier now felt like a gateway between his two worlds, the boy he once was and the man he had become. Jack picked up his phone, staring at the illuminated screen. Decisions had to be made, choices that could change not only a family's destiny but perhaps his own. The lessons of the past whispered in his ears, memories of cold and hunger, warmed by the unconditional love and compassion that had turned his life around. The driver was still waiting for an answer, and beyond the bridge, 3 lives hung in a delicate balance between hope and despair. Jack closed his eyes, letting the memories of his childhood on the streets flow freely. Every moment of fear, every hungry night, every tear his mother had hidden from him, all of it had prepared him for this moment, for this choice. The city continued its relentless pace around him, indifferent to the dramas unfolding in its shadows. But for Jack, time seemed suspended in that moment of reflection where past and present converged under the dark cloak of night, awaiting a decision that would change multiple lives. Jack's phone vibrated for the 10th time that night. Amanda Chen, his CFO, had left 3 more urgent messages about the next morning's meeting with Chinese investors. It was a $500 million deal, the kind that could define the future of his company. "Mr. Martinez, we need your confirmation on the final details," read the latest message. "The investors arrive at 7 a.m. Any delay could jeopardize the entire project." Jack looked again at the bridge through the car window. A fine drizzle had started, casting a melancholy veil over the crumbling structure. Behind those raindrops, he knew, Sarah was fighting fever while her children kept a silent vigil. "Sir?" his driver asked hesitantly. "It's getting late. Miss..." Chen called again to ask if you're on your way to the office to finalize the documents. Jack shut his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision he had to make. The meeting with the Chinese investors wasn't just another deal. It was the outcome of 18 months of meticulous negotiations, an agreement that would open unprecedented access to the Asian market for his company. His phone vibrated once more. It was Thomas Burke, his longtime attorney and friend. "Jack, where are you? Amanda's about to have a meltdown. You know how strict the Chinese are about punctuality. If you don't show up tomorrow—" "There's a woman dying under a bridge," Jack interrupted, his voice hoarse. "With 2 little kids." Silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the car's roof. "Jack," Thomas began, his tone shifting from urgency to concern. "What are you thinking of doing?" "I don't know," Jack answered honestly, "but I know I can't just walk away." "The meeting tomorrow," Thomas hesitated. "If you're not there, the Chinese will interpret it as a major insult. You know how they are about hierarchy. They want the CEO, not a representative." Jack stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man staring back looked older, more tired. Elena's words echoed in his mind. "Sometimes, mijo, life puts you at a crossroads not to test your success, but your heart." "Thomas," Jack said finally, "I need you to make some calls. First, I want the best medical team from Central Hospital on standby. Second, prepare whatever paperwork is necessary for an emergency admission. And third, call Amanda. Tell her she'll have to lead the meeting tomorrow." "Jack, think this through," Thomas tried to argue. "There are charities, social services." "No," Jack cut him off. "Remember what Robert always said? When life puts someone in your path, it's not a coincidence, it's a responsibility." Hanging up, Jack turned to his driver. "Peter, I need you to pick up Dr. Rivera at his home. He's the only one I trust for this case." While Peter made the call, Jack got out of the car, the light rain wetting his face. Each step toward the bridge felt weighted by his decision. The empire he'd built, the expectations of hundreds of employees, the future of his company. It all pressed down on him. But then, as he approached the makeshift shelter, he heard Sarah's weak cough and saw the twins, still awake, clutching each other's hands while watching their mother with frightened eyes. In that moment, all his doubts vanished. "Hey," he called softly, making the boys turn around. "I've come to help, Dr. Rivera arrived within 15 minutes, bringing his private medical team. He was an older man with graying hair who had cared for Jack's mother in her final days. He examined Sarah with a grave expression. "Severe pneumonia," he diagnosed, "complicated by malnutrition and exhaustion. We need to get her to the hospital immediately." The ambulance arrived quietly, its lights flashing against the bridge walls. The paramedics worked with professional efficiency, transferring Sarah onto a stretcher while Dr. Rivera kept the twins occupied, explaining each procedure with simple, gentle words. At Central Hospital, the best team was already waiting. Sarah was taken for tests right away, while a pediatrician examined the twins. Jack watched everything with a mixture of worry and determination. His phone kept vibrating in his pocket, urgent messages about the meeting, about millions at stake, about the consequences of his absence. 3 hours later, Dr. Rivera entered the waiting room where Jack sat with the sleeping twins. His face was serious. "It's more serious than we thought, Jack," he said quietly. "Her kidneys are failing. Years of poor nutrition, chronic stress, and exposure to the elements have caused severe damage. She needs a transplant." Jack felt the weight of those words. A transplant meant a long battle, medically, financially, and bureaucratically. How long does she have? Without immediate dialysis and a transplant in the next few months, Dr. Rivera let the sentence trail off. "She's young and strong, but her body is exhausted, and with 2 little kids to care for." Jack looked at the twins sleeping on the waiting room couch. Ethan and Noah, so small and vulnerable, had already faced more hardship than many adults. His phone vibrated once again. It was Amanda. "Jack, the Chinese investors just landed. You can still make it for the breakfast meeting with them. We can smooth over the delay if you come now." Jack's reply was brief. "Amanda, the meeting is yours. I trust you. And if the Chinese can't understand there are things more important than money, maybe they're not the partners we need." Hanging up, Jack turned to Dr. Rivera. "Start treatment, the best we've got, and arrange for compatibility testing. I want a nationwide search for donors." "And the boys?" the doctor asked, glancing at the sleeping children. "I'll take care of them. Jack replied without hesitation. They need stability while their mother recovers. Dr. Rivera nodded, a small smile on his face. You know, Jack, Robert would be proud. Elena, too. They taught me that true wealth isn't measured by money, Jack replied, adjusting the blanket over the twins. It's measured by what you do when life gives you the chance to make a difference. The morning sun began to rise outside, its first rays shining through the hospital windows. Somewhere in the city, an important meeting was starting without him. Millions, perhaps billions of dollars might be lost. Headlines would question his decisions. Shareholders would demand explanations. But there in that hospital room, watching two boys sleep and knowing their mother was finally receiving the care she needed, Jack Martinez knew he had made the only choice possible. Because some decisions go beyond business and profit. They're about humanity, about compassion, about making a difference when fate places an opportunity in your path. Sarah would soon be transferred to the ICU. A long battle was just beginning. There would be sleepless nights, worries and challenges. The twins would need support, stability, and plenty of love to overcome the trauma they had lived through. But as the sun rose over the city, Jack felt a peace no business deal had ever given him. Elena had been right. Sometimes life puts you at a crossroads not to test your success, but your heart. And that morning, under the fluorescent hospital lights, the heart had won. Jack's secretary was already rearranging his schedule, cancelling appointments and rescheduling meetings. The media would soon learn of his absence from the meeting with the Chinese investors. Speculations would arise, and the market would react. But all of that seemed distant and unimportant compared to the soft breathing of the twins and the steady beep of the monitors keeping Sarah alive. Dr. Rivera returned with more details about the treatment. Sarah would need dialysis 3 times a week. The search for a compatible donor would begin immediately. In the meantime, she would need intensive care, proper nutrition, and plenty of rest. What about the boys? The doctor asked. They'll need a stable environment, routine, and maybe even psychological support. My house has more than enough space, Jack replied. And Maria, my housekeeper, has experience with children. I'll work from home as much as possible, be there for them. The doctor smiled. You know this will change your life completely, right? Jack glanced out the window toward the bridge where it had all begun. Some changes are necessary, he said. Some are inevitable, and some are simply the right thing to do. His phone vibrated one last time. It was Thomas. The Chinese cancelled the deal. Amanda did her best, but, well, you know how they are. Do you want me to prepare a press statement? Jack typed his response while watching the first rays of sunlight illuminate the twins' sleeping faces. Tell the truth. Say I chose to save a family instead of closing a deal. And if anyone questions it, remind them companies can be rebuilt, but lives are irreplaceable. The city outside was waking up, another day of business and bustle beginning. But inside that hospital room, a different kind of business was being concluded. An unwritten agreement between a man who had everything and a family that had nothing but hope. And sometimes, Jack thought, hope is the most valuable investment of all. Sir, which one is which again? Whispered Maria, the housekeeper, as she watched the twins sleeping in the back seat of Jack's car. They had just arrived at the mansion after the first visit to see Sarah in the hospital, and the boys had dozed off during the drive, exhausted by the emotional upheaval of the past few days. Jack smiled, noting the small differences he was starting to recognize. Ethan has a tiny birthmark behind his right ear, and Noah has a stubborn curl that always falls over his left eye. He paused. Also, Ethan is usually the first to speak, while Noah tends to finish his sentences. Maria nodded, impressed by her employer's detailed observation. In 20 years working for Jack Martinez, she had never seen him pay so much attention to non-business details. How do we wake them up? Jack asked, suddenly unsure. It was just one of the many small decisions he felt unprepared for. Leave it to me, sir, Maria said, leaning gently into the car. Niños, she called softly. We're home now. And there's hot chocolate waiting. 2 bright green pairs of eyes opened almost at once, still sleepy but instantly alert at the mention of hot chocolate. It was the first time Jack saw them smile, a shy, hesitant smile, but it lit up their faces in a way that squeezed his heart. The Martinez mansion was an imposing Mediterranean-style structure with 3 floors and a sweeping view of the city. For Jack, who lived alone, it had always seemed far too big. Now, watching the twins stare wide-eyed at the building, it seemed even bigger. "Is it a castle?" Noah whispered. "It's bigger than our whole school," Ethan added, clutching his brother's hand. "It's your home now," Jack said, surprising himself with how natural the words felt. "Shall we go in? Maria makes the best hot chocolate in the world." The boys took their first steps inside hesitantly, as though afraid they might break something just by being there. Their worn clothes and scuffed sneakers looked even more threadbare against the polished marble of the foyer. "First," Maria announced with motherly authority, "a warm bath for both of you, then chocolate and food. Mr. Jack bought new clothes for you." The twins exchanged glances, that silent conversation only they could understand. Can we take a bath together?" Ethan asked timidly. "We always do." "Of course," Jack replied quickly, realizing how frightened they must be with all this change. Maria prepared a room with 2 beds, but if you want to sleep in the same one, that's fine too. Bath time proved to be the first of many adventures. Jack, who had never bathed a child in his life, found himself with rolled-up sleeves, drenched in water and soap suds, trying to figure out the logistics of washing 2 5-year-olds at once. "Does the soap sting your eyes?" he asked nervously, holding the imported shampoo bottle like it might explode at any moment. "Mom always made a little visor with her hand," Noah explained, demonstrating. "And she sang while she washed our hair," Ethan added. "Sing?" Jack swallowed hard. $1 billion deals suddenly seemed simpler in comparison. "Any song will do," Maria chimed in from the doorway, laughing at her boss's panicked expression. "Just distract them." Jack started a hesitant version of Happy Birthday, making the boys laugh for the first time, a clear, bright sound that echoed through the marble bathroom and filled an empty place inside him. After their bath, dressed in new, soft pajamas, the twins looked different. The fear was still there, but so was a growing curiosity about their new environment. In the huge kitchen, sitting on stools too tall for them, they blew on steaming hot chocolate while Maria prepared sandwiches. "Are we visiting Mum tomorrow?" Ethan asked, a chocolate mustache forming on his upper lip. "Is she going to get better soon?" Noah added, his small voice heavy with worry. Jack sat down between them, choosing his words carefully. "We'll visit her every day," he promised, "and the doctors are doing everything they can to make her well. But it'll take time, and meanwhile, you need to be strong and patient, okay?" The twins nodded solemnly, a maturity beyond their years reflected in their green eyes. The first night was challenging. Despite the bedroom prepared with great care by Maria, 2 beds side by side and a gentle nightlight, the boys took a long time to fall asleep. Jack found them huddled together in one bed, whispering to each other. "I can't sleep," Ethan admitted when Jack came in to check on them. "It's too quiet here," Noah explained. "Under the bridge, there was always noise." Jack pulled a chair close to their bed. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" he offered, recalling the stories his own mother had told him on cold nights under awnings. "A true story?" Ethan asked. "About princes," Noah suggested. "How about a story about a boy and his mom?" Jack began, his voice soft in the bedroom's dim light. "A boy who also slept on the streets once, but found out life sometimes surprises us with special people who change our destiny." The twins listened intently as Jack recounted his own story, adapting it for their young ears. By the time he reached the part about Robert and the laundromat, both were asleep, their breathing soft and in sync. A routine gradually took shape in the days that followed. In the mornings, Maria helped with breakfast and getting dressed, a process that still made Jack nervous, especially when matching clothing colors. Hospital visits were the highlight of the day for the boys, who gradually saw their mother regain her strength. But it was at night that the real challenges emerged. The nightmares began on the 3rd day. "No! Mom!" The scream shattered the mansion's silence, sending Jack racing to the boys' room. He found Ethan sitting up in bed, trembling, while Noah tried to console him. "He dreamed Mom was gone," Noah explained, his own eyes brimming with tears. "And we were alone again," Ethan sobbed. Jack sat on the bed, pulling them both close. "Hey, look at me," he said gently. "You're not alone. You'll never be alone again. I promise. But what if Mom doesn't get better?" Noah's question was only a whisper. "She will," Jack answered with unwavering conviction. "And until then, you have me, Maria, and a whole team of doctors caring for her. Sometimes, life gives us families different from what we expected." That night, Jack slept in the armchair in the boys' room, waking occasionally to check on them. By morning, his neck and back ached, but the sleepy smiles on the twins' faces were worth any discomfort. Days turned into weeks. Jack learned to tell which twin had a nightmare by the tone of the scream, to get the bathwater temperature right without testing it on his elbow, and to make clumsy but functional braids in their hair as it began to grow longer. His home office gained a corner full of toys and children's books. Important meetings were occasionally interrupted by little intruders who needed to show him a drawing or ask an urgent question about dinosaurs. "Sir," Maria commented one evening, watching Jack try to explain the difference between a T-Rex and a velociraptor, "you're different." "Different how?" "Happier," she replied simply. Jack realized she was right. Despite worries about Sarah, the business troubles following his absence from the Chinese meeting, and the challenge of raising the twins, something had changed inside him. It felt as though a space he hadn't known was empty was being filled. One afternoon, while working on his laptop, he overheard the twins talking in the office play corner. "Do you think he'll be our dad?" Noah whispered. "I don't know," Ethan replied, "but he tells stories like Mom does." Jack pretended not to hear, but that innocent exchange hit him like a punch in the gut. When had he started thinking of them as his children? When had the thought of returning them to a normal life with Sarah, once she recovered, begun to hurt? The boy's nightmares gradually subsided, replaced by calmer dreams. Now it was Jack who occasionally woke in the middle of the night, haunted by the fear of losing them. One night, after another hospital visit where Sarah showed constant improvement, Jack was helping the twins with their bath when Ethan asked a question that caught him off guard. "Uncle Jack," he began hesitantly, "why don't you have kids?" "Yeah," Noah chimed in. "Your house is so big." Jack paused, sponge in hand. "I guess I never found the right kids to share it with," he answered honestly. The twins exchanged that silent look only they understood. "What about now?" Ethan asked. "Did you find them?" Noah finished. The bathwater must have splashed in Jack's eyes because he felt something wet run down his face. "I think so," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I believe I did." That night, after the boys fell asleep, Jack stayed by their bedsides for a long time, watching them. Ethan had kicked off the covers as usual, and Noah was curled up next to him. At some point between the first cup of hot chocolate and that night, they had become more than just two children he was helping. His phone vibrated with a message from Thomas, his lawyer. "The papers you requested are ready. Are you sure about this, Jack?" Looking at the sleeping twins, Jack had never been more certain of anything in his life. He typed his reply, "Absolutely. Once Sarah recovers, I want to talk to her about adoption." Putting his phone away, Jack pulled the covers back over Ethan and brushed Noah's stubborn curl from his eye. Elena had once told him, sometimes life gives you gifts disguised as challenges, and there, watching those two little miracles fate had placed in his path, he finally understood exactly what she meant. Outside the mansion, the city moved on at its frantic pace. Somewhere, executives debated the impact of his recent business decisions on the company's stock. But in that softly lit bedroom, none of that mattered. Jack Martinez, the billionaire, the man who had built an empire, was learning to be something far more important, a father. And though he still had much to learn and many challenges ahead, he knew he wouldn't trade this new adventure for all the business deals in the world. Because sometimes life's greatest riches come in small packages with green eyes and hesitant smiles, with nightmares that need soothing and dinosaur questions that need answering. And sometimes learning to be a dad is the greatest lesson a man can receive. Sleep finally overtook him right there in the armchair beside the boy's bed. For the first time in many years, Jack Martinez drifted off with a smile on his face. his dreams filled not with numbers and contracts, but with children's laughter and the promise of a future full of love. The hospital room looked different that afternoon. Sarah, after weeks of intensive treatment, had been moved to a more comfortable private room. The curtains were open, allowing the late afternoon sunlight to stream in, and for the first time since her admission, she was sitting in a chair near the window. Jack arrived alone for the visit. The twins were at their first session with the child psychologist he had hired. He found Sarah gazing at the sunset, her fingers absent-mindedly playing with the edge of the blanket in her lap. "Are they okay?" was her first question. As always, the love of a mother shining in her now stronger voice. "They're good," Jack smiled, taking a seat in the chair beside her. "The psychologist said they're incredibly resilient, and Maria is completely smitten with them. I think she finally found the perfect audience for all her sweets." Sarah smiled, but there was something different in her eyes today, a shadow, a restlessness Jack had noticed before, but which now seemed more pronounced. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone, not even the boys." He shifted in his chair, giving her his full attention. Sarah took a deep breath, her fingers now clutching the blanket tighter. "Ethan and Noah. They're not my first children." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with 2 decades of unspoken pain. Sarah closed her eyes, as if mustering the courage to continue. "I was 17, she said in almost a whisper. "I lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knows each other, and secrets are kept bottled up like poison." Jack watched her trembling hands, but didn't interrupt. He'd learned that some stories need their own pace to be told. "I met Daniel in my senior year of high school. He was a few years older, played guitar at church. I thought it was love." She let out a bitter laugh. "When I found out I was pregnant, Daniel just disappeared, and my parents—" Her voice failed. Jack offered her a glass of water, which she accepted gratefully. "My parents were very religious, very worried about what the town would think. They decided I'd be sent to a boarding school in the city. In reality, it was a home for single mothers run by nuns." The sun outside was setting, bathing the room in orange tones that made the tears glistening in Sarah's eyes look like crystals. "It was a girl," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "She was born on a spring morning. I barely got to hold her. They took her almost immediately. Said it was better that way, that she'd have a real family, that I was too young." Jack's own heart clenched. How many young mothers had endured this pain? How many children grew up not knowing their origins? "All I know is that the family who adopted her was from the city. They named her Olivia." Sarah wiped away the tears now streaming freely down her cheeks. "I've spent the last 20 years thinking of her every day. On her birthday, I always buy a small cake and sing happy birthday quietly." "Why are you telling me this now?" Jack asked gently. "Because—" Sarah hesitated. "Because you've been so good to my boys, so generous with me. And because this time in the hospital, being so close to death, made me realize I can't die without at least trying to find her, not to interfere in her life, just to know she's all right." Jack studied Sarah's face, marked not only by her recent illness, but by years of regret and longing. Her young woman forced into an impossible decision, carrying that weight alone for 2 decades. "And the twins?" he asked. "They don't know they have a sister." Sarah shook her head. "How could I explain that to 5-year-olds? They've been through so much already. And what if we find her and she doesn't want to meet us? I can't risk hurting them like that." Jack got up and walked to the window. The sun had fully set, leaving only a purple trace on the horizon. Below, the city was switching on its lights, thousands of stories unfolding at once. "Sarah," he turned to her, "do you trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. "After all you've done for us, with my life, then let me help. I have resources, contacts. I can look for your daughter discreetly without involving the boys for now. If we find her, you decide how and when to tell them." Tears filled Sarah's eyes again, but there was something else in them now, a spark of hope. "You do that. Consider it a promise," Jack said, sitting beside her again. "But I need to know everything you remember. The name of the institution, exact dates, any details that might help. Sarah closed her eyes as if reaching into the depths of her memory. The place was called Our Lady of Grace Home. She was born on September 15th, 2004 at 7:15 in the morning. She weighed 7 pounds. She had a tiny birthmark shaped like a crescent moon behind her left ear. Jack jotted down every detail, realizing how carefully these pieces of information had been kept in the heart of a mother who never stopped loving her first daughter. "Promise me one more thing," Sarah said once he put away his phone. "Promise that if we find her, you won't tell her right away who I am. I want her to have the choice of whether or not she wants to meet me." "I promise," Jack replied solemnly. "We'll do it your way, on your time." A burst of childish laughter echoed in the corridor. The twins were arriving with Maria for their evening visit. Sarah quickly wiped away her tears, forcing a smile. "Our secret," she whispered. Jack nodded, watching as her face lit up genuinely at the sight of her sons entering the room. Ethan and Noah ran to hug her, excitedly recounting their day, completely unaware of the conversation that had just taken place. As he watched that scene, Jack made another silent promise to himself. He would find Olivia, not just for Sarah, but for those 2 little boys who deserved to know their older sister. Because sometimes families need a bit of help to become complete again. The clock on the wall marked the start of another hospital night, but for Sarah, it was the start of something more. A journey of redemption, a chance to heal an old wound that had never fully closed, and Jack would be her guide in that search, just as he had been her family's guardian angel when they needed it most. "Mr. Martinez, the shareholders are demanding an emergency meeting." Amanda Chen's tense voice crackled through the phone. "Shares have dropped 12% since the deal fell through with the Chinese. The media is questioning your leadership." Jack was looking out the window of his home office at the twins playing in the garden under Maria's watchful eye. Ethan was trying to teach Noah how to do a somersault on the grass, resulting in more laughter than successful acrobatics. "Schedule the meeting for Thursday," he said, massaging his temples. "And Amanda, thanks for holding down the fort." Hanging up, Jack turned his attention back to the computer screen, where a thorough search for adoption records from 2 decades ago continued at a snail's pace. The search for Olivia was proving more difficult than expected. Records from that time were incomplete, and many institutions had closed their doors. Uncle Jack! Uncle Jack! Excited shouts pulled him back to the present. Noah had finally managed a somersault, even if it was a bit crooked, and the two came running to show off. "Look!" Ethan exclaimed, entering the office with dirt on the knees of his new jeans. "Noah did it." "Almost as good as yours," Noah added, equally dirty but beaming with pride. Jack smiled, quickly minimizing the adoption search screen. "That calls for a celebration. How about ice cream after lunch?" Their joyful faces were interrupted by the phone ringing. It was Thomas, his attorney. "Jack, have you seen the cover of Business Weekly? They're questioning your recent decisions. There are rumors the board might call for your temporary removal." The twins noticed his expression change. "Is everything okay, Uncle Jack?" Ethan asked, his small voice filled with concern. "You look sad," Noah observed. "Just boring work stuff." Jack forced a smile. "Why don't you both go wash up for lunch? Then we'll have that ice cream." Once the twins left, Jack grabbed the magazine Thomas had mentioned. The headline was blunt: "The End of the Martinez Era. How the Billionaire is Losing His Business Focus." The article harshly criticized his recent choices, especially the cancelled deal with the Chinese investors. Anonymous sources on the board questioned his commitment to the company ever since he had informally adopted 2 street kids. Anger rose in his throat as he read those words. How dare they reduce Ethan and Noah to street kids? How could they imply that love and compassion were signs of corporate weakness? His phone vibrated again. Another investigator reporting a dead end in the search for Olivia. The frustration of failing to keep his promise to Sarah weighed heavily on him, adding to the business pressure. "Sir?" Maria appeared at the door. "Lunch is ready, and the boys are worried about you." Jack followed her to the dining room, where the twins were already seated, clean and serious, a rare sight for 2 usually lively children. "Uncle Jack," Ethan began hesitantly. Are you in trouble because of us? We heard you talking on the phone, Noah finished, green eyes filled with guilt. Jack's heart squeezed. He sat between them, taking each one's hand. Hey, look at me, he said softly. You two are the best thing that ever happened to me. Some grown-ups don't understand that, but they're wrong. But your job, my job is important, Jack gently interrupted. But family is more important. Always. And you are my family now. The smile he got in return was worth more than any stock market gains. After lunch, while the boys enjoyed their chocolate ice cream, Jack made some calls. First to Amanda, instructing her to prepare a comprehensive report for the shareholders' meeting. Then to Thomas, urging him to speed up the search for Olivia. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, a ritual now filled with stories, songs, and plenty of hugs, Jack went to his office to review the company's financials. The media's criticisms weren't entirely unfounded. Profits had dipped in the last quarter. But as he analyzed the spreadsheets, patterns emerged that he hadn't noticed before. His new perspective, shaped by his love for the boys, revealed different opportunities. Why not expand into social projects? Why not create a foundation to help vulnerable families? The phone rang one last time that evening. Sarah, from the hospital. How are they? She asked. As always. Happy, Jack replied honestly. Today they learned somersaults. There was a brief silence on the other end. And the search, any news? Not yet, he admitted. But I won't give up, Sarah. That's a promise. After hanging up, Jack returned to the financial reports, though his thoughts remained divided among 3 children, 2 little boys sleeping upstairs, trusting him completely, and a young woman somewhere in the city, unaware that someone was looking for her. The media could criticize, shareholders could question, but Jack Martinez had found something more valuable than profits and stock prices. He had found a greater purpose. In his office, surrounded by paperwork and spreadsheets, he smiled at the sound of light footsteps in the hallway. We can't sleep, Ethan announced, entering hand in hand with Noah. Can we stay here with you? Noah asked. Jack pushed the reports aside, making room on his lap for both of them. Always, he replied, feeling the warmth of their small, sleepy bodies against his chest. As the boys dozed off in his arms, Jack reflected on how much his life had changed. The challenges were greater now, balancing 2 seemingly incompatible worlds. But for the first time, he felt he was doing exactly what he was meant to do. Somewhere in the city, Olivia was living her life without knowing she had 2 younger brothers waiting to meet her. And despite the pressure, the criticism, the obstacles, Jack knew he would keep searching. Because he finally understood that success wasn't measured only in numbers. It was measured in smiles, in hugs, in little victories like somersaults on the grass. The moon shone high in the sky as he gently carried the twins back to their beds. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more criticism, more seemingly fruitless searches. But for now, in that peaceful night, Jack Martinez was simply a father, watching over his children's sleep and dreaming of the day when his family would be complete. Fate has a peculiar sense of humor. After weeks of intense searching by a dozen private investigators and countless dead ends, Olivia was found in the most unexpected way possible. Jack was at the hospital for his morning visit with Sarah when he noticed something different. The nurse changing her IV wasn't the usual one. She was a young woman in her early 20s, brown hair in a messy bun, moving efficiently and silently around the room. As she leaned over to check Sarah's vitals, Jack saw it, a small, crescent-shaped mark behind her left ear. The world seemed to stop for a moment. His heart pounded as his mind processed the impossibility of this coincidence. The birthmark, the age, even her delicate features that resembled a younger Sarah. What's your name? He asked, his voice rasping. Olivia Santos, she said with a professional smile. I'm the morning shift nurse this week. Nurse Regina is on vacation. Jack had to sit down. Sarah was sleeping peacefully, unaware her lost daughter was mere inches away, caring for her without knowing the bond they shared. How long have you worked here? He managed to ask, trying to sound casual. I started my internship 6 months ago, Olivia replied, making notes on the clipboard. But I've always known I wanted to be a nurse. Something about taking care of others, you know. Jack watched how gently she adjusted Sarah's pillow, such a natural, caring gesture. Could it be that, even unknowingly, something in their blood, in their DNA, formed an invisible bond? Your parents must have been proud when you chose this career, he commented, studying her reaction. A shadow crossed Olivia's face. My adoptive parents have always supported me, she said after a brief hesitation. But sometimes I wonder if my biological mother would approve of my choices. The unexpected confession made Jack's heart skip. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. It was Maria letting him know she was arriving with the twins for their morning visit. Excuse me, Olivia smiled, heading for the door. I'll be back later to change her dressing. Jack waited until she left to pull out his phone with trembling hands. He had to confirm every detail before giving Sarah hope. He called Thomas, passing on the information he had: full name, workplace, the distinctive birthmark. Within an hour, his lawyer confirmed it. Olivia Santos, born September 15, 2004, adopted through Our Lady of Grace Home. It was her. After so much searching, Sarah's daughter was not only in the same city but caring for her own mother. The twins arrived with their usual energy, running to hug Sarah, who had woken up. Jack watched them with new eyes, imagining how they would react when they learned they had an older sister. Uncle Jack is acting weird today, Ethan noted, ever observant. He looks like he's seen a ghost, Noah added, making Sarah laugh. We need to talk, Jack said to Sarah once the children went off with Maria to buy something from the cafeteria. We found Olivia. Sarah's face went pale. Where? Closer than you think, he replied softly. She's a nurse, here at this hospital. In fact, she just left this room. Sarah brought her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. The young nurse, I felt something different about her, but I thought I was just imagining. She has your mark, Jack confirmed gently. The crescent behind the ear and the DNA. Well, just look at her. She's a younger version of you. Does she know? Sarah whispered. Not yet. But she mentioned she wonders about her biological mother, Sarah. I think it's time to tell the twins. They need to know before they meet their sister. Sarah nodded slowly. How do we explain? With love, Jack replied simply. It's the only way. When the twins returned, Jack and Sarah exchanged looks. It was time. Ethan, Noah, Sarah called gently. Come here. Mommy has a story to tell you. The boys climbed onto the bed, one on each side of her, their bright green eyes watchful and curious. Sarah began sharing, in simple, kind words, the story of a young woman who had to make a very hard choice a long time ago, a baby girl who had to be given to another family, regret, love, and hope. So, Ethan processed it slowly. We have a grown-up sister. Is she nice? Noah immediately asked. Sarah smiled through tears. She's a nurse. She takes care of sick people, helps them get better. Like she's doing for you? Ethan asked. Sarah's smile wavered. Yes, my love. Exactly like that. Can we meet her? The twins asked in unison. Jack stepped closer to the bed. How about right now? She's working here today. The boy's eyes widened with excitement. Sarah gripped Jack's hand, seeking strength. I'll call her, he said, leaving the room. He found Olivia at the nurse's station, organizing charts. Miss Santos, could you come with me for a moment? There are some people who'd really like to meet you. Olivia followed him, puzzled. When they entered the room, she froze at the doorway, instantly sensing something important was happening. Olivia, Jack began softly, I'd like you to meet Ethan and Noah. They're your brothers. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia looked at the twins, at Sarah, and back to the boys. Her clipboard fell to the floor with a dull thud. Mum! The word slipped from her lips like a prayer long held back. Sarah extended a trembling hand. My girl! The twins watched with wide eyes, still absorbing that the gentle nurse caring for their mom was, in fact, their older sister. You have a mark like Ethan, Noah exclaimed suddenly, breaking the tension. But his is on the other side, Ethan added. Olivia touched her birthmark, tears rolling down her cheeks. 20 years of unanswered questions, of unexplained emptiness. were beginning to make sense in that hospital room. Jack quietly retreated to the door, giving the newly reunited family the space they needed. Some stories must find their own path, and this one was only just beginning. The hospital room was quiet that night. Jack had taken the twins home, leaving mother and daughter alone for the first time in 20 years. Sarah and Olivia looked at each other through the decades of absence, each searching for words to fill in the years lost. "You have her eyes." Olivia finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. "My adoptive parents always said my eyes were different from theirs." Sarah smiled through tears. "And you have your grandfather's smile." "My father, he would have adored you." "Why?" The question burst out before Olivia could stop it. There was no need to elaborate. They both knew exactly what she was asking. Sarah inhaled deeply, summoning the courage for the conversation she had rehearsed in her mind for 2 decades. "I was 17, Olivia. Practically a scared kid in a small town, too small for secrets and too big for compassion. Did you think of me?" Olivia's voice was barely audible. "Every single day." Sarah extended her hand, hesitantly, her heart pounding when Olivia took it. "Your birthday was always the hardest. I'd buy a small cake, light a candle, and sing quietly." "September 15th, Olivia said. "I always felt something strange on that date, like part of me knew." Silence returned, but it was different now, gentler, as though the unspoken words were finally finding their place. "When I found out I was pregnant with the twins," Sarah continued, "my first thought was of you. The fear of losing more children consumed me. That's why I fought so hard, for so long." "Until you got sick," Olivia finished, her professional side surfacing. "I read your medical file before I knew who you were. Renal failure caused by years of neglecting your own health, putting 2 little children first." Sarah noticed Olivia's voice falter at the mention of her brothers. "They're amazing, aren't they? Ethan's so protective, always looking out for Noah." "The way an older sister should have," Olivia said, tears rolling down her face. "Olivia, no." Sarah squeezed her hand. "It's not your fault. The only one to blame is me for not being strong enough to fight for you. But you fought for the twins, because losing you taught me that some battles are worth any sacrifice." Sarah paused, coughing lightly. Olivia instantly checked her vitals, a reflex that made Sarah smile. "You're a nurse. You take care of people?" "I've always wanted to make a difference in people's lives," Olivia admitted. "I guess, in some way, I was looking for you in every patient I cared for." The heart monitor beeped steadily, a constant reminder of the moment's fragility. Sarah studied her daughter, now a strong, compassionate young woman dedicated to saving lives, and felt a mixture of pride and regret that nearly tore her heart in two. "The compatibility tests," Olivia suddenly said. "I want to do them." "What?" "For the transplant. I'm a nurse. I know you need a kidney. And I know our blood types match. I've checked." "No, Olivia," Sarah protested. "We just found each other. I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Olivia straightened her shoulders, a gesture that reminded Sarah so much of her own father that it took her breath away. "For 20 years, I imagined all sorts of reasons why you gave me up. I imagined you didn't love me. You didn't want me. Olivia, hear me out," she said gently. "Now I know the truth. I know it was out of love, even a painful love. I know you nearly died taking care of my brothers, making sure they never went through what I went through." She paused and wiping her tears. "Let me help now. Let me be part of this family, not just by blood, but by choice." Sarah was openly sobbing now. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Olivia smiled, her grandfather's smile. "Besides, what kind of nurse would I be if I couldn't save my own mother?" The hug that followed was 20 years late, but no less powerful for it. Mother and daughter held each other as if trying to compress 2 decades of pent-up love into a single moment. "The twins will be so happy," Sarah murmured. "They already adore you, you know. Noah can't stop talking about how the nice nurse makes bandages that don't hurt." Olivia laughed through her tears. "They're so little, so brave." "Like you were," Sarah said. "Like you are. Morning was breaking by the time they finally let go. Olivia had to start her shift, and Sarah was exhausted from the emotional conversation. But before leaving, Olivia paused at the door. "Mum?" The word came naturally, as though her heart had known it before her mind. "I forgive you, and thank you for giving me the chance at a good life, even though it broke your heart." Sarah watched her daughter leave, the white nurse's coat like the symbol of the guardian angel she had become. In a few hours, Jack would arrive with the twins, and they would begin planning the surgery. There would be fears to confront, risks to weigh, delicate explanations for two small boys. But in that moment, lying in her hospital bed, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known since she was 17. Her oldest daughter had come home. And more than that, she had returned with the most precious gift she could offer, a second chance at life. The rays of the rising sun entered through the window, painting the room in golden shades of hope. Sarah closed her eyes, her hand instinctively resting where she would soon carry a piece of her eldest child. Olivia's kidney would be more than just a transplanted organ. It would be the final bridge between past and present, the last piece in the puzzle of their reunited family. And perhaps, she thought before drifting off to sleep, that was the true magic of fate, turning 2 decades of pain into a moment of healing, not just physical, but of the soul. "This is your home now," Jack announced, opening the door to the lovely residence in a tree-lined neighborhood. It wasn't as grand as his mansion, but it was spacious and welcoming, with a backyard perfect for children to play in. The twins ran inside immediately to explore, their gleeful shouts echoing through the empty rooms. Sarah, still recovering from the transplant, entered leaning on Olivia for support, her eyes brimming with tears at the sight of a home she never imagined she would have. "Jack, this is too much," she began, but he cut her off gently. "It's the least I can do. Besides," he smiled, "it's only 10 minutes from my place and 15 from the hospital where Olivia works." Olivia squeezed her mother's shoulder. In the weeks since the transplant, their bond had grown stronger than either could have predicted. It wasn't just a kidney that united them, but a mutual understanding that transcended the lost years. "Mom!" "Olivia!" The twins' shouts came from upstairs. "There's a huge bedroom up here." "They must have found the master suite," Jack chuckled, "and just wait until they see their rooms." Sarah watched her 3 children exploring the house together. Ethan and Noah had instantly warmed to their older sister, and Olivia seemed determined to make up for every lost moment. It was common to find her after a hospital shift, still in uniform, playing with the boys or helping them with homework. "I was thinking about turning that space out back into a music studio," Jack remarked casually, "for when you feel ready to start teaching again." Sarah touched the old violin Jack had retrieved from under the bridge, the last one she had left from better times. "You think of everything, don't you?" "Actually," he hesitated, "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About purpose, about making a difference." They were interrupted by more excited shouting. The twins had discovered their bedrooms were connected by a hidden door between the closets. "That was my idea," Olivia said proudly. "I remembered you mentioned how they hate sleeping apart." Furniture arrived throughout the week. Jack had hired a decorator, but it was the personal touches that turned the house into a home. The twins' drawings on the walls, family photos beginning to fill empty spaces, Sarah's violin on its stand in the living room. One evening, while the boys slept and Sarah rested, Jack and Olivia chatted on the porch. "How are things at the hospital?" he asked. "Different," she admitted. "After the transplant, after everything, I see each patient differently. Every family has a story, you know?" Jack nodded. "That's exactly what I want to talk about. I'm restructuring the company, creating a foundation to help families in vulnerable situations." Olivia observed him curiously. "Shareholders may not be too happy about that. Some aren't," he laughed without humor. "But others understand that companies can be more than profit machines. They can be agents of change. Like you were for our family," she added softly. The sound of footsteps interrupted them. Sarah had woken up and joined them on the porch. "Shouldn't you be resting?" Olivia shifted into nurse mode. "I am resting," Sarah smiled, settling between them. "I just need..." I need to take it all in. Sometimes I wake up thinking it's a dream. It's no dream, Jack reassured her, though sometimes I feel the same. The silence that followed was comfortable, each lost in thoughts. Upstairs, the twins slept soundly in their connected rooms. Sarah's violin glimmered softly in the living room light, waiting for her hands to bring it to life again. Tomorrow I'll start looking for a school for the boys, Sarah commented. I need to organize our life. I've already taken care of that, Jack and Olivia said at the same time, making the three of them laugh. All right, Sarah raised her hands in mock surrender. It appears I have two very efficient guardian angels. 3, came a sleepy voice from the doorway. Ethan and Noah stood there clutching their blankets. We take care of you too, Mum. Soon all 5 of them were settled on the porch. The twins snuggled between the adults, gazing at the stars twinkling over the city. Dad, Noah mumbled drowsily, are you still going to live alone in the mansion? The innocent question made the adults look at each other. It was true. Since the twins had moved in with Sarah, the mansion felt oddly empty. Yeah, Ethan chimed in. You could live here. There's a spare room. Boys, Sarah began, but Jack interrupted softly. Actually, he said, I've been thinking a lot about it. About family, about belonging. He paused, gathering courage. Sarah, I know it's still soon. You're recovering, and we have so much to build. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ready, I'd like to be part of this family, not just as Uncle Jack. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle night breeze. The twins, now fully awake, stared with wide eyes. You want to be our real dad? Ethan asked hopefully. Please, Noah added. Sarah looked at Olivia, who smiled through tears. Her oldest daughter gave a slight nod, granting her blessing. Jack, Sarah began, her voice shaking, you've already been part of this family since that night under the bridge. The smile that spread across Jack's face was like a sunrise, bright, warm, filled with the promise of a new day. The twins cheered quietly, mindful of the late hour, but their huge smiles said it all. Olivia discreetly wiped away tears, watching how this improbable family fit perfectly together. I guess now, she said softly, we're truly complete. The night drifted on peacefully in their new home, where 5 hearts beat in a rhythm of hope and fresh beginnings. The next day would bring plenty of tasks, schools to settle on, a foundation to structure, a life to rebuild. But at that moment, under the same stars Sarah once gazed at from beneath a bridge, a family united not just by blood or papers, but by choice, by love, by fate. And sometimes, the most beautiful dreams are those we never dared to dream. Morning light bathed the old bridge, revealing its scars and its promises. Jack Martinez stood at the spot where everything had begun, the exact place he had found 2 crying boys on that night that changed so many lives. But today, the view was different. Scaffolding and construction machinery surrounded the structure, and the detailed plans in his hands showed the future about to rise from the ruins. Dad! 2 voices echoed through the structure. Ethan and Noah ran toward him, followed by Sarah, who walked more slowly, still adapting to the renewed energy the transplant had given her. 6 months had passed since the surgery, and each day she seemed stronger, more alive. We brought our drawings for the playground, Ethan announced, lifting a folder full of colorful papers. And ideas for the library too, Noah added, green eyes sparkling with excitement. The Bridge of Hope project had started as a feverish dream during a sleepless night, after the boys asked to visit their former home. Seeing them point out other children now living where they once did, awakened something deep in Jack. Here, he pointed to a large area on the technical drawings, will be the community center, with special rooms for music classes. Sarah smiled, her fingers instinctively seeking Jack's. The violin he had retrieved from under the bridge was now central to the program she had developed, music as therapy for traumatized children. And over here, she indicated another spot on the plans, we'll have the community clinic where Olivia will coordinate the preventive health program. The project was ambitious, not just physically renovating the bridge, but creating a fully functional housing complex. Decent apartments, recreational areas, A medical center, a library, educational spaces, a true community emerging from the shadows. "Mr. Martinez," called Carlos, one of the current residents of the area who was now part of the construction crew. "The engineers need your approval to start laying the foundation for the first block." Jack waved him over, turning to the twins. "Want to help Dad supervise the start of the work?" The boys raced ahead, excitedly explaining to Carlos everything they'd learned about construction over the past few months. Sarah watched them, tears glistening. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," she whispered. "From the bridge that was our last resort to a bridge that will be hope for so many." The transformation was already visible. Cracks in the pillars were being filled with special materials. Exposed rebar would be covered, and the old graffiti would give way to artistic murals. But the real change was in the people. Families who once hid in the shadows now actively participated in planning. Children who feared dreaming now illustrated their futures in bright colors. The bridge that had so long symbolized despair was reborn as a monument to hope. Sarah naturally took the lead in the social programs, especially assisting single mothers. Her personal story, from music to homelessness and back again, inspired trust and relatability. Her violin lessons, once a means of survival, became a bridge between trauma and healing. "Look, Mom," Noah called, pointing to a cleared area. "That's where we used to sleep. Now it's going to be a garden, with colorful flowers," Ethan added, "so nobody has to stare at just gray concrete anymore." The project grew organically, fueled by community involvement. Jack structured an innovative business model, combining social investment with financial sustainability. Other initially skeptical business people now sought to replicate the approach in different parts of the city. Olivia Fien, when not at the hospital, devoted herself to establishing the preventive health program. "I don't want other kids going through what the boys did," she said at planning meetings. "I don't want other mothers pushed to the brink like ours was." The twins became the project's natural ambassadors. On weekends, they guided visitors through the construction site, sharing their story with a unique blend of innocence and wisdom. "Under this bridge," Ethan explained to a group of investors, "we thought there was only sadness, but then Uncle Jack, well, our dad, showed us there can be hope, too," Noah finished. One afternoon, while supervising the installation of the first playground equipment, Jack found a message scrawled on the base of one of the structures. "Thank you for giving us a prettier sky to look at." It was in Ethan's handwriting, with stars and a smiling moon drawn by Noah. "They're right," Sarah commented, approaching with coffee for the workers. "You didn't just give us a roof, you gave us a new sky to dream under." The project drew national attention. The press, which had once criticized Jack's corporate decisions, now hailed him as a pioneer in social enterprise. But praise and recognition weren't what drove him. It was the smile of a child discovering the library for the first time, the hopeful look of a mother receiving the keys to her first home, the sound of Sarah's violin echoing through the community center, healing invisible wounds with music. "You know what's most amazing?" Sarah remarked one afternoon, watching the twins help other kids with homework in the temporary community space. "They've turned their pain into strength to help others. They carry no shame, only purpose." Jack embraced his fiancée, recalling his own journey from poverty to wealth and how fate had led him back to that bridge with a greater purpose. "Sometimes we have to go back in order to move forward," he replied softly. "And sometimes the places that hurt us are exactly where we're meant to build something new." The sun set over the renewed bridge, its new lights glowing against the darkening sky. Below, families gathered at the makeshift community center for another evening of activities. The sound of Sarah's violin drifted on the air, mingling with children's laughter and lively conversations. The bridge, which once silently witnessed so much suffering, was now a monument to transformation, a living testament that sometimes the most beautiful endings begin in the darkest nights, and that true success is not measured in money, but in renewed lives and rebuilt dreams. The sun rose differently that morning. Sarah watched from the window of their new apartment, straightening Noah's tie with a smile, while Ethan battled his unruly hair in the mirror. A year had passed since the construction began, and today was the official opening of the Bridge of Hope complex. "Mum," Ethan called out, giving up on his hair. "Can I use the violin you gave me for the performance?" Sarah felt her heart swell. Over the past few weeks, she had taught the twins a special piece for the ceremony, a composition weaving their story of hardship and redemption into music. "Of course, my love," she said, running her fingers through her son's rebellious curls. "Your grandfather would be proud to see that violin used to celebrate hope." The sound of footsteps in the hallway announced Olivia's arrival. Already in her nurse's uniform, she would deliver the inaugural speech for the community clinic before starting her shift. "The first guests are already arriving," she said, pausing to help Noah with a stubborn shirt button. "And Dad's nervous about his speech." The word Dad still sounded new and special when Olivia used it. After Jack and Sarah's wedding 3 months earlier, she naturally started calling him that, much to the twins' delight, who insisted that, "Now we're a real family." The transformation of the old bridge was breathtaking. What once was a crumbling structure now rose majestically, its restored pillars painted in soft shades reflecting the morning sunlight. The housing complex blended seamlessly with the landscape, featuring hanging gardens and green areas that softened the concrete. But the true transformation was in the people. Families once living in the shadows now had a permanent address, decent work, and hope in their eyes. The community center bustled with activities, from Sarah's music lessons to the healthcare programs overseen by Olivia. "Ready?" Jack appeared at the door, looking sharp in his dark suit but wearing that slightly crooked smile that revealed his nerves. "Almost," Sarah replied, giving a final tug on the bow of her dress. "The boys want to show you a surprise before we go." Ethan and Noah darted to their room, returning with a framed piece covered by a cloth. When they removed it, Jack felt tears well up. It was a collage of photos and clippings telling their family's story. From that night under the bridge to the recent wedding, every precious moment preserved with the careful love only children could give. "It's for the community center lobby," Ethan explained proudly. "So other families know dreams can come true," Noah added. The complex lobby was already crowded when they arrived. Officials, media, business people, and most importantly, families, both longtime and new residents of the reborn community. The ceremony began with the twins' musical performance. Their small violins sang a melody that spoke of pain and hope, of dark nights and golden dawns. Sarah stood backstage, weeping quietly while Jack held her hand. Olivia took the podium first, her firm voice carrying the authority of someone who knew both pain and healing. "This is not just a housing project," she said, gazing at her family in the front row. "It's a project of reconnection, of second chances, of families who come together and rebuild themselves. My own story is proof of that." When Jack took the stage, silence fell. He looked at his children, the twins who taught him how to be a father, his eldest daughter who brought even more love into the family, and at Sarah, the woman who showed him that true wealth is not measured in money. "A year ago, this bridge was a symbol of despair," he began. "Today, it's a monument to hope. But not because of the buildings we've constructed or the programs we've launched. The real transformation is in every rediscovered smile, every reborn dream, every reunited family." He paused, voice trembling slightly. "Personally, I owe everything to this bridge. It was here that I found my sons. Yes, found them. Because family isn't just blood. It's a daily choice of love. It was here I rediscovered my purpose, realizing that success without meaning is empty." Sarah joined him on stage for the symbolic handover of keys to the new families. Each had a unique story, but they all shared the same glow of hope in their eyes. "When we lived under this bridge," she said, her gentle voice carrying the strength of someone who had hit rock bottom and climbed back up, "I used to look at the stars and beg for a miracle. I never imagined the miracle would come in the form of a man in a suit who stopped to hear 2 children cry." The day went on with performances, guided tours, and much celebration. The twins ran here and there, proudly showing off every detail of the complex they'd helped envision. Olivia juggled her roles, coordinating the clinic team and snapping photos with the family. By evening, after most guests had left, the Martinez family gathered on the suspended garden crowning the complex. From there, they could see the entire city preparing for nightfall, lights beginning to twinkle on the horizon. "Look, Mom," Ethan pointed skyward. "The stars are starting to come out. But now we can see them from a prettier place." Noah smiled. Sarah hugged her children, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Jack joined the embrace, and Olivia completed the family circle. "You know what's really amazing," Olivia mused, gazing at the now softly illuminated bridge. "How fate sometimes uses our deepest pain to create something beautiful. If it weren't for that terrible night, we wouldn't all be here right now. And we wouldn't be a family," the twins chimed in unison, making everyone laugh. Jack looked at his family. The family fate had gifted him in the most unexpected way. He remembered all the nights the twins had woken him with nightmares, each step of Sarah's recovery after the transplant, and the moment Olivia found them at the hospital. "They say bridges are built to connect places," he said quietly. "But some bridges connect destinies, heal hearts, and build futures." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, watching the last rays of sunset paint the sky gold. "And sometimes," she added, "you have to lose everything to find something bigger than yourself." The next day, life would go on. Life would go. There would be more families to help, more stories to transform, more bridges, literal and metaphorical, to build. The Bridge of Hope project was already being replicated in other cities, forming a network of social transformation spreading like ripples in a pond. But in that moment, under a sky starting to fill with stars, 5 people whom fate had brought together celebrated not just the opening of a project, but the construction of something far more precious, a family born under the shadow of a crumbling bridge and blossoming in the sunlight of compassion and love. The twins had fallen asleep in their parents' arms, worn out by such an exciting day. Olivia snapped one last photo before leaving for her night shift. Sarah plucked at her violin strings, a gentle melody that seemed to cradle the entire city. Jack watched everything with a calm smile. A year ago, he had been just a lonely billionaire searching for meaning. Today, he was the father of 3 remarkable children, husband to an extraordinary woman, and part of something money alone could never buy. The moon rose in the sky, bathing the bridge in a silvery glow. From where they stood, they could see families settling into their new homes, lights flickering in the windows like earthly stars. Once a silent witness to endless pain, the bridge now safeguarded the promise of brighter tomorrows. "It's time to go home," Sarah whispered, careful not to wake the boys. Home. Such a simple word, yet so full of meaning. For a family that began with nothing but the stars overhead, having a place to call their own was the greatest of miracles. As they walked to the car carrying the sleeping twins, Jack paused for one last look at the illuminated bridge. There stood the proof that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a single act of stopping to listen. That compassion can build bridges stronger than concrete and steel. That family is far more than blood. It's choice, love, and new beginnings. The city slept under a blanket of stars, but at the Bridge of Hope, new dreams were already taking shape. And for the Martinez family, each sunrise brought the certainty that the most beautiful endings can start in the darkest nights, when we find the courage to reach out to those in need and open our hearts to second chances.